What was the original question? You asked me the simplest question, and I'm just going to go off on a tangent.
It's fine. How would you describe your own personal practice?
My own personal religious practice?
Yes.
Well, I think music and religion go hand in hand. Like, to me, there's something very spiritual about music. And, I guess that's where, like, a lot of the religious illusion comes from in this particular album, is from me only ever having felt anything I can consider divine through music. Like, just, like, I guess prayer on its own doesn't do anything. So I forget who said this. It sucks that I forget who said this, but somebody somewhere said, prayer is when you talk to God, meditation is when you listen, and music is when you do both. And that's, I guess, my practice is music.
It's quite clear because you not only very carefully craft your songs, both in terms of the actual arrangement of the instruments, but also lyrically.
I don't put too much effort into crafting them. Like, I'm very much a go with the flow guy. Like, I pretty much almost exclusively follow my first instinct when it comes to music. Like, I follow it until my new instinct is this isn't working. Like, if something works, I keep following it until it doesn't work.
Is it instinct, or have you picked up on what works and what doesn't over time?
I mean, there's some degree of, like, if you have a little bit. I wrote pretty much this whole album without any real understanding of music theory. It's just from, I taught myself to play guitar and piano just from learning other songs. From having a background in drums and starting with drums, I got to see songs from, like, a holistic landscape perspective, because when you're playing drums, you're not playing chords, you're not really playing melody, you are shaping the carpeting for the song. So, like, if, I guess, what's a great example? Something like 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover, the Paul Simon song. Those drums make the song, because not just because they're iconic or whatever, but because they really texturally change the song. AC/DC is a great example of the same basic drum beat, but all the drummer does is switch from the hi-hat to a ride cymbal, and all of a sudden the song opens up on the chorus. Like, that's what I mean by seeing songs as like a landscape, because I'm the person as the drummer. The drummer's the one that, like, puts the foundation for everything else to build off of. So starting with drums, I started from that angle of just seeing songs as, like, not just chord to chord like a lot of players do, like guitar players and stuff, but seeing it as, like, verses to choruses to bridges to pre-choruses and sections, and almost like Lego pieces that you'd, like, stack. It's just sections of a song that just fit together. What was the question?
I didn't really ask anything, but
Oh.
I liked that you went off on a tangent there.
Yeah, that'll happen a lot.
So I'd like to sort of dig into the lyrical choices, since we've established that musically you just kind of go with the flow.
Yeah, so Subconsciously Conscious Part 1, for example, and this is a theme throughout all of my music, and I think all of music is it's just thievery that we disguise as originality. Subconsciously Conscious Part 1 is just the chords to Hotel California, but it's played in a different time signature, so you don't notice that it's Hotel California.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the same chords as Hotel California. I like the chord progression, and I liked kind of that 6-8-3-4 feel, so I just put them both together, and that's how you got Subconsciously Conscious.
Going back to the religious influences in your music, the first line reads, "Every time I look around, I've climbed too high to reach the ground. I'm passing down my tasteless crown of thorns." So it's a beautiful line, but it's very morose.
Yes.
So tell me about that and how they play into the greater scheme of the song, but also the album itself.
Okay, well, the idea of Subconsciously Conscious and the theme of it, I guess, is being active in your life choices. For me as a musician, I wrote Subconsciously Conscious when I was in high school. I just wanted to play guitar and to rock and roll, and I knew that's what I wanted to do, but I was stuck in the parameters I was in. So at the very least, I knew I didn't want to just take the, I guess, subconscious kind of pipeline of high school to college to 9 to 5 to death, sort of. Because that's really what it is. If you're lucky, you get to retire, but in today's day and age, no one really is going to retire. High school, college, 9 to 5, death didn't seem appealing to me. I wanted something greater, and I knew I could do something greater. So that's why that's sort of where the song came from, and that energy of being conscious in our subconscious, because I think our subconscious really holds our deeper desires and our deeper potential. So being subconsciously conscious is about, awakening, I guess, your higher self or something like that. Not to be sounded too much like a hippie guru, but
well, I would say it sounds a little more Freudian, but
yeah, a little bit.
So the lines, "Now I finally freed myself from all the guilt and pain I've felt. I won't let it inside me anymore. Nothing left between the lines. Not alive, but haven't died." Is this the point in the song where we come to experience this sort of expulsion of passivity?
The lyrics from part 1 and part 2 are slightly different. Part 1 and part 2 are very much a call and response, because part 1 is kind of like, I guess, with any problem, the first step is to identify the problem. Part 1 is very much identifying that problem. And then when you get to the bridge and there's this big, wall of sound, sort of guitars and all that fun stuff, and the last final chorus is that final realization that what you are in is not what you want. And then part 2 is just the response to that, of now this jolt of feeling that you get once you decide to now be active in your life, if that makes sense.
After that, there's sort of this gradual climb of the song up into that grandiose wall of sound that you talked about. So over top of that is sort of the cycling of the "I'm subconsciously conscious," subconsciously new. And after a bit, it sort of becomes meditative.
Yeah, a little bit.
So is that maybe intentional, granted what you've said about meditation?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, so I would like people to approach this album. This is the most pretentious artist thing I will probably ever say. But because this is what I've done with it, is I would like for people to approach it the way you would approach a prayer or a tarot reading, that's why there's just this minute of space noise at the beginning, because I want people's ears to be tuned in to what they're listening to, not just, you put it on, you listen to the songs, and then you go on about your day. Some of the songs, like Distant Memory, Two Roads, those are just fun rock songs. Like, yeah, there's deeper meaning behind them, but they're just the fun songs that people who want something like fun to just listen to, that's what it's for. But Subconsciously Conscious, Fairy Tale Ending, Breathe, Full Moon Fever, that's what makes it really an album to me, and what I think makes it art is now it's not just a bunch of songs for someone to listen to. It's really a work of art, in my opinion. I'm a little biased because I made the thing, but like when I listen to an album, I like to tune my ears to whatever sound source I'm using, whether it's headphones or a speaker or whatever. So that's why I like that minute of just space noise, the guitars moving around in the speakers, because I want people who are ready to listen to it to really be tuned in to listen to it. So that's why that's there. That's why it's kind of meditative at the end, because it is a bit meditative. It's like a meditation. It's almost like a guided meditation, I guess, the whole album. Anything you want to know about yourself, or anything you don't know that you want to know about yourself, like the way you would a tarot reading or a prayer, just set your intentions, I guess, and then give it a listen and see what you come up with. Because when I wrote these lyrics, I don't really think about them. Like I just go with the flow, and like some of the specific lyrical choices, I still don't know where they came from. They were buried in the subconscious, I guess. But like I don't comb over lyrics. I don't comb over lyrics line by line, word by word, trying to find the thing that like says what I'm trying to say. I just let the lyrics flow whenever they're ready to flow, and then if they're not happening, they're not happening. Like there's some songs where I write like a really great hook, and then like that's where it ends, because there's no other thing for it. Every once in a while I'll like, if a song's like 70 to 80% of the way there, then I'll give it the nudge of like, okay, now I gotta actually put some thinking power behind it. But I don't start from scratch trying to make something that just isn't there, if that makes sense.
Do you think your songwriting approach is a lot different to other songwriters or musicians?
I know it's different than some other songwriters that I know who have talked about their songwriting process. Like it's because when I was at Berklee College of Music, there was a songwriting class, which was a lot of techniques and theory on like how to write lyrics, and how to write lyrics that make sense, and how to write coherent lyrical songs. And I hated that class because it felt disconnected from the spiritual experience of feeling the muse kind of flow through you, and whatever lyrics come to you just come to you. It felt false. It felt like false honesty, I guess. But the reason I think that almost works is because I just write down like the first kind of like spark of an idea, and then I just leave it alone. And then I'll flip through my songbook and I'll come across that great idea, and it'll just re-spark that thing. And it's kind of like thinking of it again. And since I only wrote down really the seed of the idea, I'm fresh to now just think about it more. And it just kind of re-sparks the idea. And I'll come back to a song after a year, and it's like 40-50% of the way done, and then I'll like play through it, and then as I'm playing through it and I get to what I think is the end, it just keeps flowing, and I'm like, okay, well, there it is. So because because I'm not combing over it, I'm only just writing the things that are like instant sparks of inspiration. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Subconsciously Conscious Part 2 does flip the lyrics a little bit.
Yeah.
So every time I look around, I'm still too high to reach the ground. I can't give up my tasteless crown of thorns. This song is also a lot faster, a little more aggressive. And in the first one, your voice is a little more soft and melodic.
Actually singing, yeah.
And in the second one, you're just screaming at us.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
So, what do you feel about the vocal changes between the two, as well as the?
Well, it's a, pun intended, a conscious shift between part 1 and part 2.
Like a wake-up call.
Yeah. Part 2 is a response to part 1. That's why the lyrics are slightly different. Specifically, I can't give up my tasteless crown of thorns is the feeling of once you realize, I guess, your quote-unquote potential and you make the decision to chase after it, it's not something that you can stop. Like, I can't stop now that I've decided to do this because it's the only thing that feeds my soul. Like, we talked about it being almost like a music being a religion to me. It really is. Like, it's the thing that makes my soul happy and brings my spirit peace is making music. So I can't stop. I can't. And that's sort of where I can't give up my tasteless crown of thorns comes from is, you know, I believe that I have a calling to make music and I can't ignore that now because I've made the decision. And similarly, anyone, whether it's music, painting, maybe you want to be a mechanic or maybe you're really passionate about being a janitor. Like, if that is your calling and you feel that as your calling and you commit to it, once you feel how much it feeds you as a person, you can't go back. You can't. So, that's that. Why am I yelling in part 2? Well, I guess the reason it's 2 parts is because I didn't actually know how to do the song. I had both ideas in my head of like to do the song like in part 1 and do the song like in part 2, and I was like, why don't I just do both? I can just do both. Initially, it was one long like 8-minute song. Part 1 and part 2 was just Subconsciously Conscious, and that was the song. It was when I wrote that song too, and I decided like I'm just gonna do both, that I kind of realized like, okay, yeah, I guess I'm making an album. Because that Subconsciously Conscious 1 and 2 was, I guess, the first time where I felt like an artist with music. I felt like a musician because I had made something that I think is really beautiful in part 1 and part 2. And at the time, it was this like 8-minute song, but I decided to split it in 2 parts just rather than having one 8-minute song to start the album. I played around with track listing a little bit. I had thought about having part 1 open the album and part 2 close the album, but they just sound so good next to each other because that's how they were intended. So, what was the question? That's why they're 2 parts.
First of all, actually, riddle me this. Why didn't you feel like an artist before?
It's not that I didn't feel like an artist, but because I've always seen like these musicians that I idolize just as like otherworldly. Like I saw them as superhuman. Like I didn't think that I could just do that. Because I'm from really the middle of nowhere in Pennsylvania. Like there weren't many, for some reason a lot of bands skip Philadelphia on tours, probably because it's Philadelphia. Like usually they go to like Harrisburg or New Jersey, but Philadelphia in particular they kind of skip. So I didn't go to many concerts. I always felt like out of reach of these musicians that I idolized, and so it just didn't. I didn't feel like anyone could do it. But then after I did do it, I was like, oh yeah, I guess anyone can do it. So,
going back to part 2, what is this crown of thorns, or what's your crown of thorns, and why is it so hard to get rid of?
It's just your calling. Like I believe my calling is music, but for the greater good of the world. Like I don't want to be a musician just for fame and money and bitches. Like that's just not what I'm about. I genuinely believe that music is a way to change the world. It is a way to reach people in a way that nothing else can really do. Music consumption is at an all-time high. Music production is at an all-time high. Like there's more music being put out and more music being consumed every day. It's just increasing because of how easy it is to get music. And I think that, again, I'm a little biased, but in an ideal world, if everybody approached this album like a prayer or a tarot reading, everybody in the world, then we would have a different planet. And whether or not that's feasible, I don't know, but that's what I believe my calling is to not just make great music, but to do something with the world.
What do you want to do?
I want to change the world. I want to make the world a better place.
How?
How to make the world a better place. Just direct quote, I guess, from Jesus would be love your enemy. I think that's much easier said than done. It's very, very hard to love your enemies. Treating your neighbor like yourself, treating your neighbor the way you'd want to be treated, much easier said than done. Because throughout all of human and the history of the universe, really, we've had a scarcity of resources, and we're in one of the first times ever where resources aren't scarce. Like, they really aren't scarce. They're just being hoarded. And I'm not trying to say, like, communism is the answer, because if you look at world history, it's not the answer. I'm not saying capitalism is the answer, because if you look at world history, it's not the answer. I'm saying, like, we can find a way to run things better than we are, and the first thing we need to do is care about people. And I think, if everybody in the world did what they loved, not what would pay the bills, then we'd be taking a step in the right direction. If everybody found their thing that they love doing, that they just, like me with music, like I need to do it because it just feeds me, feeds my soul. If everybody found that thing, then I think the world would be unrecognizable.
Is that your call to action?
That is my call to action. Find what you want to do with your life.